we're here to talk about role play. So, all the kinky, fun, sexual playways that you can get down with your partner or partners. That's what we're getting into, taking on different identities, how to address some of the issues with embarrassment or feeling like you don't know how to get into your role. I'm Alix Pruett, a certified sex, love, and relationship coach with a BDSM and kink focus. I work with men, women, and couples plus who want to transform their old patterns, pain, and beliefs so they can create thriving relationships that are deeply connected, playful, and fulfilling within themselves and with others. All right, so as usual, let's just dive into the topic of role play. Role play is a fun and sometimes intimidating way that we can want to explore different fantasies or bring a different spice and essence to the bedroom when we play with partners. It can be a great way to explore different identities or aspects of ourselves, find deeper connection, learn more about our partners, right, and ourselves, along with finding um, more connection, more understanding, and just this greater depth into being in these play spaces with one another. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about really is getting into role play. So let's say you've been in a relationship for a little while, or this is a new subject you're broaching with a old partner or a new partner, but it's something you would like to explore. How do you go about doing that? I would say one of the top ways is to start exploring it as just a fantasy of what you would like to do. And maybe that has very defined identities. So, like a doctor and a patient, or a nurse and a patient, or um, a massage therapist and the client, or a teacher and a student, whatever that may be. It can look pretty much an infinite number of ways. It's just deciding what you want to explore, but you can talk about that with your partner in a way that it's not like we have to do this, but allows you kind of to brainstorm and co-create, allow yourself to like express what you're wanting to explore in that space. Also, giving your partner the space to talk about what it is they would want to explore in it, or bring up any issues where they may have resistance to exploring that space with you. Um, Maybe they have hesitation because you're wanting to be the patient and you want them to be a doctor, and they're like, well, I can't be a doctor. I know nothing about being a doctor, right? And that's okay. That is completely normal, especially when it comes to wanting to explore different identities. I know in my own experience, um, not even in bedroom play, but when I've like sat down in an interview or even with coaches I've worked with and they've asked me to role play out a situation, like my system will kind of go into freeze if I haven't actually given it some some thought and insight beforehand of how I would approach that. So, number 2 is like starting to take those steps into role play. And this is, to me, a really expansive area of exploration with these different identities that you want to take on or these different roles you want to take on. Because to me, it's also that spot where people can get the feeling of more of the hangups of like, well, I don't know. I don't know what to do, which to me is a type of freeze response in that they don't know what action to take moving forward. And that's okay. That's what we're here to help anyone work through who's wanting to take on these roles, to try on a different mask for the day, whatever that may be. So, the thing I'd like to invite you into with exploring, we're just going to call them these different identities that you may be taking on, is for now, just pick one. And if you want, if it's helpful, grab a piece of paper and a pen. And like as I'm reading, or not reading through these, but like asking these questions aloud, feel free to jot down what your answers would be or write out the questions and come back to it later so you can actually answer these for yourself in a way that's supportive to you and getting to explore and play with these things within yourself. So the first one is, what is the identity you're wanting to play with? Is it a doctor? Is it a nurse? Is it a coach? Is it the patient? Is it a student? Is it a teacher? Um, Again, whatever that is for you. Maybe you want to work with more archetypes, right? So maybe it's the goddess or a god. Maybe it's a specific one. So maybe you're looking at like wanting to embody Kali during your sexual role play, or you're wanting to embody Shiva or whatever other plethora is out there. Again, like you could even be a computer nerd for this. Like anything that you could consider an identity or an archetype can be that. You could, if you go back to standard archetypes, there's the jester or the fool, the knight, right? The princess, the queen. Again, it's whatever you want to explore with. So just jot down what that role is, what that identity is that you want to embody for this experience. And then just ask yourself, like, do they have a name? What would their name be? What would they be called? How would other people address them? And one of my favorite ways to work with any of these questions is just going with the first thing that comes to mind. Like you can do this exercise as many times as you want over. So you can explore as many different identities and different roles as you want. But in this instance, we're just sticking to one. So know that you can always come back to it and just go with what comes to you first. So let's say you were wanting to take on the identity of being a nurse. And the first name that comes to mind for me is Paisley. Why Paisley? I have no idea. That's just the name that comes. And like, that's my answer. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's perfect just as it is. And let it be and move on to the next question. So the next question is like, what does Paisley do in her role? Like you're wanting to explore who Paisley is in this example, or who, whatever the role is you're trying to identify with is. What do they do, right? What is their purpose? What are they trying to accomplish? What is it that they want? How is it that they move? How do they speak? How do they dress? How do they carry themselves? So, like, what's their posture like? And then, if you allow yourself to just recognize this identity, recognize all those things, the next question is like, how does it feel to be them? Right? Do they typically feel confident? Do they typically feel sexy? Do they feel very shy and reserved? Right? You can explore any of these feelings. You can explore any of these embodiments. It's just getting clear on what this role is for you and what you're wanting to explore with your partner. Right now, you're just gaining a better understanding of who that is for you and what you would want brought to this experience so you can actually create it. I genuinely believe that one of the biggest things that keeps us from having all the things we want, right, is ourselves, and that our imagination is the biggest limit to what that is. So, the next piece I want to invite you into is if you've identified these different parts, right, these different aspects of what this identity is, I want you to just ask yourself, and again, see what comes for an answer. Where does this part live inside you? And just notice if you have any parts of your body show up, right? If you have let's say your stomach starts feeling butterflies in it, or you start noticing muscle contractions in your thighs, or uh, tingles and sparkly sensations down your arms, or all of a sudden you get like a warm wave or a cold wave or a hot wave of temperature through your body, just wherever your attention is drawn in that moment. And then the invitation is to just sit with it and notice what's there. You can get curious more so, right? And start asking questions. What does this identity dislike? What do they not want to experience, not want to have happen? And just see what comes. If nothing comes, that's all right. If a flood of 100 things comes, that's all right. Just notice and give yourself the space to notice. And then we're going to bring it to a close and just sit for a couple minutes. And again, just notice, bring your focus to what you just got to experience in exploring this identity, this aspect, this part, this role you want to be able to embody. My best advice, I guess, is, let's say you have a partner who really wants you to play the doctor, right? And you have nothing that comes up for you in personal answers when you're doing this exploration. That's all right. One thing I do want to invite you into is maybe looking at, like, what are the qualities that you consider like to be a doctor? Because maybe your partner is talking about a certain kind of doctor, right? And you're getting an image of that, and that's not like your doctor version of yourself, right? That's not the role, the identity that exists within you. Like, maybe the doctor that exists in you is really malicious or really loving and caring, and that's just not quite lining up. That's all right. You don't have to explore something that you really aren't able to connect with. One of the best ways to really get into role playing, in my opinion, and to get such high value experiences out of it, deeper intimacy, healing from past traumas, more connection, more greater vulnerability and openness in relationships, is by being able to connect with those parts or those aspects. Um, and if, when you like try to go in for that exploration, everything's just a complete blank, right? That's going to be much harder to work with, or it could have you coming up against more frustration, right? Because there's either something in you that doesn't identify in those ways whatsoever, or something that's potentially blocking you from being able to connect with it. So, again, the more you can connect with this identity, with this role, with this aspect, the easier it's going to be to bring it forward. You can start to learn that role's stories, right? You can imagine them in their workspace or in their daily life based on this information you're gaining. You can start allowing yourself to feel into that experience. Again, how they would speak, right? What are their boundaries, right? All of us have boundaries, whether we recognize it or not. And maybe this identity's boundaries are different than your boundaries normally are. And again, you don't have to let that role's boundaries override what yours are. Just get curious about it and see what boundaries you have for yourself that you need to hold, and which ones you're willing to play with that exist for this role or identity, right? So for me, as a sex coach, my role or identity in this particular position is that even though I am like part of my classification is sex coach, like I do not engage in any sort of sexual activity with clients. I will help them tap into their sexual energy. I will help them with different tools and techniques so they can build deeper awareness within their own bodies, um, with different practices that they can use at home, along with guided practices that they can utilize. But that involves like no nudity during sessions and no direct sexual interactions between me and a client ever. That is a solid boundary. Now, outside of my role, outside of my identity as a sex, love, and relationship coach, I interact with people in sexual ways, right? I have play partners that I go and engage with. And again, they're different roles. And we take on different roles all the time, whether we kind of realize we're taking them on or not. There's a lot more stuff in psychology that comes through, and it can be referred to as masking, I think, especially with the autism community. But there are these different identities we put on. Like if you let's say you are a parent, right? And you live with your spouse and you work a job and regularly go to breathwork retreats, right? So right there you have parent as an identity, you have spouse as an identity, you have your like employer or employed working identity. You also have your breathwork identity. Granted, like that is a very limited scope of what most people probably do in their life, but we put on these different roles. There's certain things will feel open and safe to share in certain subsets of communities where other ones we never talk about that. Let's say you're in the BDSM and kink realm and you're Christian, right? That is a high possibility. You're probably not going to be as prone to talk about your BDSM and kink lifestyle in your Christian community, and that's okay. But in the realm of your sexuality and creating community around BDSM and kink, you have that space to have those open conversations. Again, it's a different type of identity, and a lot of that comes from creating safety within ourselves and knowing what boundaries we need to hold for ourselves in these different spaces, whether we're doing that consciously or not. It's part of the human experience in being very social animals. We learn how to do these things early on. Now, for the sake of this is bringing a consciousness and an awareness to the roles you're wanting to take on, which I think is incredibly beautiful. Actually, the first couple times I ever really explored role play with a partner and on a conscious level of knowing like we're creating a role play situation in the bedroom, it was incredibly interesting because I actually got to experience immense spaces of healing from past traumas that I didn't even know my body was carrying in a very safe, loving, and nurturing way. And one of these instances, it was actually incredibly fascinating for me at the time because I was just diving into this world of sex, love, and relationship coaching and starting to have a better understanding of altered states of consciousness, along with studying trauma and how those things can be instigated by relationship dynamics. Well, one of my partners and I, at this point in time, he was a Dom, and I always used to like wonder how heavy he was doming me, right? So this one night I asked him, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, right? Well, 1 being no doming at all, and 10 being like your most intense dom that you would go into. What level would you say like you have domed me on? And I think his answer was maybe a 7 at most. I can't remember what it was exactly. And I was like, well, that's interesting. Well, I want to know what a 10 is, right? I have my masochistic side, and I did trust this partner in exploring those heavier spaces. So it was a safe thing for me to ask for. We had pretty good boundaries set at the time, even though I was fairly new in this lifestyle. And he was very good at reading my body for when I was not okay. Um, but it was really fascinating because we're in more of this Dom sub dynamic. And in that, he was going to throw punches, but when he would land a punch, he'd actually hit with the flat of his hand. So he wasn't hitting me particularly hard, but from what I could see on peripheral vision, it looked like he was going to swing and hit me with a full punch. And it's fascinating because I remember laying there, and one of my defaults personally with trauma experience is actually going into a high freeze state and a dissociation. So it means cognitively, like I can see what's going on, know what's going on with my brain, but I'm not feeling what's going on in my body. And as I was in this scene layout, I recognized that my body was in a fear response and particularly a freeze response. And as I was laying there noticing this, I went, that's odd. Why is that happening? And one of my amazing huskies, my doggos are huskies, by the way, um, she came up and started rowing at me. And I don't know if anyone's familiar with a husky row, but it's a woo, woo, woo. And she was doing this in my face, and she was doing it really incessantly. And I kind of looked over at her and I placed my hand on the side of her face. And I actually got this wave of flashbacks. And it was from when she was about maybe a year old. And it was all this flood of memories from the one time I've ever had a partner actually physically put hands on me. And it was interesting because all of a sudden I felt this burst of just sobbing and crying move through my body. My dog, at the same time, her head is still on my hand and she's pushing harder and harder till her hand, or like my hand's on the floor along with her head. And she's sitting there now in a more high pitch row, almost like a cry. And my partner stopped and he laid down and he held me. And it was not a response I was expecting whatsoever, but it was really fascinating for me because in watching how my dog responded, it was like she had also carried this memory. And as I sat there, like just noticing what was going on with this crying that was coming up, like I hadn't ever allowed my body to feel the fear that actually existed back in that other moment. But this was actually a safe enough space with that partner now to allow myself to feel it, with my dog now to allow myself to feel it and allow that shaking, that trembling, and those things to move out. And the thing that clicked, which I don't know why it had never clicked before, maybe because there hadn't been that point of contact between me and my dog. Um, but I remembered it was actually an issue between her and that ex partner that had started the whole cycle that actually led to him putting hands on me and me being on the floor. And as I cried, I remember looking at her and being like, oh, you've carried all of this too? And the thing that was incredibly like fascinating, like my partner and I like moved through spaces of aftercare. I got to talk about what was coming up. Um, but what was fascinating was watching my dog over the next couple weeks, like in my body myself, I felt like this weight had been lifted that I didn't even know I was carrying in my body, like on my being. And I got to observe my dog, and she actually started instigating play with my younger husky. And the older husky would play with the younger one, but she never instigated. She wouldn't go up and like do the pounces and bows by her to get the younger husky to start playing. And she started doing that. She started acting more alive. Like, I have referred to her for a very long time as like my big lazy husky, because she just lounges around like a huge cat most of the time. But she has her very like energetic, playful energy, but she usually doesn't allow that to present first. So again, this isn't saying that any of your experiences with role play have to be this healing space, right? Or have to have past traumas come up. It can be an incredibly healing space if you have the proper support and can hold yourself through those spaces. So I want to let you know, if you have like bigger waves of emotions that you are not expecting to come up arise in these situations, it's also really normal. Like, even if you haven't necessarily taken on the identity of being a nurse, right? Maybe you have something linked in your past memories around nurses, maybe a family member, maybe a nurse that like you had interacted with at a doctor's office. There's many different things that could impact why that's being carried in your body, or maybe it's connected to some other set of memories. The invitation here is, don't judge yourself on those things, right? Just know that unexpected things can come up. Unexpected things can come up during normal sex, like very vanilla style sex too. Um, it can just be a lot easier for people to try to bypass those or dismiss those or say they are weird. There's a lot of healing that can go on with sexuality, and that is one thing for why I've felt so drawn to these spaces. And if you can hear Rose happening in the background, that is currently the older husky. Um, but they can be incredibly healing spaces. So if you are in a role play scene and all of a sudden you feel a wave of tears come up, right? Like, be kind and compassionate with yourself in that space, especially if for whatever reason you have the narrative that crying is a weakness or it's not okay. Same with any of the other emotions, right? And again, it doesn't have to go into this, but going into those vulnerable spaces can also equate to some of the deepest levels of connection with another person and within yourself, right? Creating understanding, helping release old traumas, old narratives, old belief systems about who you could be. Maybe you have a bunch of emotions come up about the whole nurse identity because somebody told you a long time ago that you could never be a nurse, right? Maybe you weren't smart enough, you weren't good enough, you wouldn't have enough money, whatever it is, right? There can be all sorts of things attached to this idea of different roles and this idea of different identities for why we will kind of stick ourselves in a box around what we can or cannot be. And that's what I want to help free you of. Now, another thing that can come in super handy is, do you need props, right? Do you need physical things in your space around you to kind of help set the mood? Let's say that you're going to play a scene where it's a massage therapist and a client. Like, you're not going to want to be in a room that has high, bright lighting, intense levels of noise. Like, you're going to want to set a relaxing atmosphere I can't think of any type of massage that doesn't most benefit from a relaxing atmosphere. I worked as a massage therapist for a long time as a side note. Um, but like in that sense, like set the scene, set the space. It comes up a lot in the world of psychedelics, but set and setting are important. And that can apply to the space around us, but also our internal set and our internal space. Now, let's say you have done all this background work, you have gotten all the things together for your play space. So you have props, you have things set up, and it comes down to like you have a date set with your partner on when you're going to explore this. And for whatever reason, let's say you had an awful day at work and you just really like cannot get out of your head about it, and like you're not able to connect with whatever this roller identity is at that time. Like, cool, be kind and compassionate with yourself. Realize your internal set is not at the appropriate space for you to explore that in that moment, and figure out what it is you do need. Do you need to go take a hot bath? Do you need to take a walk? Do you need to have a delicious meal? Just some cuddles on the couch with TV. Like, what is that for you? Do you need some alone space to journal? Um, but again, kind and compassionate with yourself on like if something comes up and you're not able to do it in that exact moment. When that moment is meant to happen, it will, and it'll be fantastic in so many different ways. And you may even find that you're glad that it didn't happen the other time when you'd had the bad day at work. Um, now, so let's say you had proceeded, right? You didn't have the bad day at work. We're erasing that from our memories now. You've proceeded, you have gone into your play dynamic with your partner, and you notice sense of like feeling like embarrassed or giggly, um, not knowing what to do next, right? This is where the practice from the questions we did earlier comes in so valuable. What's the first thing that comes to mind, right? And second note, does that first thing fall within the boundaries and limits you and your partner have previously established? Let's say that you're doing a doctor scene with your partner and you are playing the doctor, and you're like, well, I don't know what to do next. And you're like, well, I'm going to shove a finger in their butt. And one of their hard limits was no anal play. Well, if you just shoved a finger in their butt, that's going to end the scene real quick. I advise going against that. Like, that's where having these conversations about what the boundaries are with your partner beforehand, if those shift or impact differently than your normal set of boundaries, like discuss those things because then you have those check marks to come back to. Um, if for whatever reason the words no, stop, slow down, like if those words are not being acknowledged for what they mean in any sort of play scene, make sure you have safe words established. I recommend having two at least. Um, and one is for a hard stop. That means all play comes to a complete stop. It means that it may not proceed again for the rest of that evening. A hard stop could also mean like right in this moment, I need to stop, and like maybe we pick up again, but maybe we don't, right? A soft limit to me is usually like don't push any further than you already have, right? Or slow down a little bit. So it's either holding at the level of intensity, we'll say, um, or backing off and being a little bit more gentle. Now, common ones in the world of BDSM are red and green, right? You think about a stoplight, slow down and stop completely. You can also use other words, but make sure that they are words that you and your partner have agreed on. That is incredibly important. You both need to know those two words. You need to be able to connect with them, even if you are in an altered state of consciousness, because that can happen with this sort of play. Even if you use no sorts of intoxicants whatsoever, alcohol, illicit drugs, medications, anything, right? Even if you're not doing breath play specifically, you can bring up different altered states of consciousness. And that's normal. Like, make sure whatever your safe words are grounded in your body, and that if you hear those, you're going to respond to them. Or if you need to speak those, right, and you're able to speak in that moment, that you can. Another thing you can also do is create hand signals, right? So let's say you and your partner are using a ball gag for whatever reason, or verbal communication is cut off for some reason. Make sure that your partner has a way to signal that something's not okay. One of the great things I've heard for different types of impact play is actually, like, if you're having somebody lay down on a massage table or a spanking bench, that you have the bottom hold something in their hand. So that could be like a set of keys, right? Because when a set of keys hits the floor, at least if it's a hard surface floor, it's going to make a sound, or chopsticks or something that, like, if you look at their hand, you can either tell that their hand is limp or that the item has fallen out of their hand. That is a surefire signal to stop and do a check in for that scene. Um, but you could also do, let's say, a thumbs up for if you're doing all right. You could do a raised hand for a stop. Like, it's, again, it comes down to you needing to know that these are the things you can use for communication if you cannot speak. And as the person on the other side of it, if you are taking a top or a dom roll, that those are the signals that mean stop. Like, I need to check in. What's going on? What other safety factors are there? Consensual non-consent can very easily fall into types of role playing, right? That is one where I definitely recommend having safe words, making sure you have had very thorough discussions about boundaries, about what's okay, what's not okay. When you are playing with things that can activate the nervous system in a stress state, so fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, there are an array of different reactions that you may get from your partner's nervous system that they aren't even necessarily conscious about, right? I know one of mine, if I start feeling repetitive stingy sensations and I start getting mad, and I'm physically restrained to where I cannot get away, run away, I will donkey kick. My partner has fun with this and he runs around me like a crazy little monkey. But in that, like, I will actually say, you're about to get a donkey kick if you keep doing that. To me, that also gives him the opportunity to decide, if he wants to back off or if he wants to proceed, right? If I wanted it to not go any further, then I would use a safe word, or even nope, I'm not doing that, because at times we will not use safe words and we will just use no, stop, slow down, standard verbiage, because I will just say those things anyway. um, and I guess the last piece that I really want to touch on is for when everything is done and wrapped up. Again, remember that bigger, more vulnerable spaces could have come up for either one of you, or any of you, let's say there's more than two people in this play scene or space. Um, and if that's the case, like you're gonna want to do one aftercare. And aftercare looks different for everyone. I highly recommend, again, before going into those spaces, like figuring out what does aftercare typically look like for you. I'm going to say aftercare can change. Like it can be that, let's say, normally your aftercare is really just wanting to be held and hugged and like told that like you're amazing and you're loved or whatever it is, right? But maybe when you get done with this scene, for whatever reason, something new was triggered and you're like, I don't want to be around anyone. I want to go take a hot shower by myself. That is perfectly legitimate. And I recommend listening to your system rather than making yourself sit there and be held when your system doesn't want to be held, right? And your partner may not like that, especially if part of their aftercare is also cuddles. Um, but there's a value in learning how to give yourself aftercare as well as learning how to do that in co-created spaces with a partner or partners. The very last piece to all of this, do check-ins. So either the next day or in the next couple days, if like let's say you're spending the night with your partner, you did your scene earlier in the night and you've kind of um, come out of that identity, like come back more into a grounded state of consciousness, then do check-ins, right? Have a conversation around what your experience was like. And this goes for both people. The things I want to invite you into here are called not invitation, um, celebratory feedback and opportunity feedback. So, celebratory feedback were the things that you enjoyed, right? These are usually the type of feedback that people like receiving because it's the validation that you did a good job, right? Then the other one is opportunity feedback, and opportunity feedback is what can tend to feel more critical to people. Um, and in that, I want to give you a little bit of a structure of how to potentially deliver that so that can be received well. And it's bringing up the like an I feel framework. So you're listing the action, how you felt, and like what the person could have done differently that would have had your experience be even like a 1 to 5 degree shift better, right? Something more enjoyable for you. So, to give an example, um, so when you kept hitting me on the thigh with the cue ball, right? It really hurt and, or I felt really hurt and angry. In the future, if you could move the cue ball around to different areas, like onto my butt, onto my other thigh, or my other butt cheek, onto my calf muscles, that would be amazing because it would spread out the sensation more. Right? So you're giving your partner an actionable item that they're going to know what to do. You're not just saying, "Well, I hated this part." Well, cool, like you didn't like that. That's good feedback to know. Hopefully they will avoid doing that in the future. And like, what would you rather receive instead? I think that wraps us up. I do want to recommend, like, if this has piqued your interest in exploring role play, to explore it and play with those spaces because it can be so expansive to explore these different identities and roles within yourself, let alone within play dynamics with a partner. Again, Be kind and compassionate with yourself. There may be unexpected things that arise in those spaces for you. And if you want more direct guidance, or let's say you're in a scene and you have something come up and you're not sure how to work through that with your partner, right? Like, I am happy to work with anyone around exploring these different identities, these different aspects, archetypes within themselves, and how to find more empowerment in them. You can find a link to my resources in the description box below or on the About page on YouTube. Um, and book a free discovery call, and we can see how we can best help you moving forward. Until next time, have a fantastic week, everyone.